Joining me now is the British ambassador to the United States, Karen Pierce. Ambassador Pierce, thank you for coming to the Sunday Show.
Thanks very much for having me.
Sure. Let's listen to what President Zelensky said about NATO this morning on CNN, and I'll get your reaction on the other side.
There cannot be any ultimatums from any country whatsoever to another country. I told them that we are running out of time. You have to admit Ukraine into NATO right now. We do not have much time. You have to accept Ukraine as a member of the EU. We deserve these alliances. Ukraine cannot say that it is not going to join NATO. NATO is saying that it is not going to admit Ukraine.
And so, Ambassador Pierce, your reaction to President Zelensky saying, once again, we should be a part of NATO, we should be a part of the EU?
It sounds a very boring answer, but there are procedures to get into NATO, procedures to get into the EU, and Ukraine hasn't qualified, doesn't qualify at the moment. But what we are doing is trying to help Ukraine defend itself. We're sending lots of anti-tank and defensive weapons there. We're also putting the economic pressure on Russia to degrade Russia's ability to fight a war against Ukraine.
Has Prime Minister Boris Johnson been in touch with President Zelensky or with President Putin since President Zelensky spoke to British Parliament?
Yes, the Prime Minister speaks to Zelensky every day. They've established a very good, warm relationship. Also, the Prime Minister calls to give him a boost, to show that we're thinking of him, that we haven't forgotten Ukraine, that we continue to look for ways to help Ukraine at this difficult moment. President Putin, the Prime Minister spoke to a couple of weeks ago. I don't think there's been anything more recent than that, but he keeps in touch with a lot of world leaders around Europe and, of course, here.
How concerned are you and British intelligence and the British government about today's news, the Russians announcing that they've conducted not one, but two hypersonic missile attacks on Ukraine?
Well, of course, one's concerned. You know, the invasion shouldn't have happened to start with. The Russians are taking no account of civilians. This is why people believe that they may have committed war crimes, and that all needs investigating. So, yes, we are worried. Hypersonic missiles, they're a new category of missile. We don't yet know all the consequences of using missiles like that. But fundamentally, the real problem is that Russia is in Ukraine with its military in the first place.
Well, I picked up on a bit of language that you used there about Putin being accused of war crimes. President Biden has said flat out that Putin is a war criminal. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also said the same thing. Has Prime Minister Johnson not gone that far? Does he not believe that President Putin is a war criminal?
What the Prime Minister has said is that what's happening on the ground in Ukraine may well amount to war crimes. And for that reason, we sponsored a decision at the International Criminal Court to launch an investigation into what's happened on the ground. If I may, Jonathan, I do want to stress one point, is that it won't just be President Putin who will be responsible for war crimes if that's what the investigation shows. It will be every single Russian general involved in Ukraine. They will be personally accountable if war crimes are committed. That's a matter of law. It's not just my opinion.
Madam Ambassador, has British intelligence confirmed reports of Ukrainians being moved to quote-unquote filtration camps inside Ukraine? I'm sorry, inside Russia.
I saw those reports from open sources from the press, but at the moment I don't have any information that would corroborate that. But obviously, if it's true, it's extremely concerning.
What should Britain, the United States, the NATO alliance do if Putin does indeed unleash chemical, biological weapons on the Ukrainian people?
Well, that really would be a war crime. You know, chemical weapons are prohibited as a matter of international law. They're universally prohibited, and it would be absolutely shocking if a member of the permanent five members of the Security Council, as Russia is, you know, they're meant to uphold non-proliferation, they're meant to uphold non-use of weapons of mass destruction. So a very important line would be crossed for the whole world if Putin does that.
But if Putin crosses the line, then how should the West respond? How specifically should the West respond?
Well, I don't want to get into what the West may or may not do, because that would be valuable information for Mr. Putin to have. But I can assure you that NATO, world leaders on the Western side, we look at a lot of these contingencies. We make our plans together. NATO leaders will meet in the coming days to talk about various scenarios and what more we can do to help Ukraine.
And how worried is Britain that Putin will end up attacking a NATO country? We're seeing more attacks on Western Ukraine coming within miles of the border between Ukraine and Poland. Is there concern that NATO will be dragged in to this, into Russia's war on Ukraine?
I think NATO, as you know, has been really careful to show that it's not escalating this war. NATO remains a defensive alliance. Putin has nothing to fear from NATO unless, as you say, he attacks it. And at that point, as the President's made clear, Prime Minister's made clear, Article 5, which is the guarantee of collective self-defence, will apply. NATO members will defend their territory, defend each other if attacked. Mr. Putin would do well not to attack NATO.
One of the things that's been commented on is just how solid the NATO alliance is as a result of what Vladimir Putin has done. You've been in foreign policy for many, many years. Are you as surprised as everyone else seems in the national security establishment by how quickly not only has the West rallied around reacting to Putin, but that the NATO alliance seems to be stronger than it's ever been?
I'm not surprised because, as you say, I've worked on these situations for a long time, and this is what happens. NATO coheres to defend European security and stability. I think the Kremlin are very surprised by how quickly NATO has come together. And, if I did a cost-benefit analysis sitting in the Kremlin, what they've done is make NATO cohere and align their positions. They've brought the US, Europe and the UK closer together on economic pressure. They've united Ukrainians against them, and they've lost ground internationally in the UN. That doesn't sound like a great result for them so far.